Coming up on this episode.
A lot of messages out there, but we mostly focus on the girls and how to protect them from being, victimized, from abuse. But where really the focus should be is on how do we raise our boys differently so they're not taking advantage of girls.
Yes.
They're not raping them, so that they're not taught that they have, guaranteed access to any woman's body, that the higher the count, makes them more of a man. We need to throw away all of that shit.
I want to do a little bit of background story. Your story excites me because I feel like it's an inspiration or something I can take from when I'm looking at it. So you left corporate America to start your own business, your own entrepreneurship. Can you walk me through a little bit of what that was like?
Thanks. Yeah, that was a huge step in just trusting myself and my vision and really taking steps to act on my purpose in this world. So I had started a health coaching business as a nutrition. Doing in the public health space, health IT for oncology practices. And then it got to the point where I just knew that I needed to be able to have, it's saying that my internet connection is unstable and you're kind of freezing.
You cut out just for a split second.
Are you
crazy?
Okay. All right, we'll just keep going. Seems like it's better now.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, all right. So it came to the point where I realized this business wasn't going to grow unless I was able to give it all of my energy and all of my time. So I took the biggest financial risk of my life and, quit a job that was well paying and offered a lot of financial stability and opportunities for growth and advancement. But, it was life on the hamster wheel, just the constant grind to fulfill someone else's vision, mostly corporate America.
Yeah.
It wasn't my own vision. And so I decided to leave and jumped into the land of entrepreneurship, which at the time, I didn't realize how much I didn't know about it. And if I had known how much I didn't know, would I still have left? I don't know. That's an impossible question to answer.
And how long was this? This was like 2
years ago.
Oh man, so you're still pretty fresh.
Yes. Yeah. And that's something I had to remind myself of, because through these past 2 years, a lot of it has just been growing pains of figuring out entrepreneurship, like how do you start a business, what's the best way to market, who's your audience, all these things I didn't know really well before because I had never done it before and it's not what I studied in school. And so, the fact that I wasn't making like a consistent, $10K a month or something coaching, well, I had to, tell myself that's okay, that's normal. This is part of the, the growing process of learning how to build a business, how to just start it up.
Yeah.
So through that journey, it was also refining what is my vision for the world? What is my purpose here? And, it started off as nutrition. I studied under precision nutrition. As a nutrition coach, I also have a master's in public health and sexual and reproductive health. And so health on the community level has always been really important to me. And through those years, I refined my vision down even more to really what is most important to me, even beyond nutrition, which is sex and sexuality, particularly for women. And that brings me to today, where I've transitioned my business from nutrition into female sexuality and really feel that I am completely aligned with my purpose here on this earth.
So do you feel like you are 100% aligned, or it continues to get refined as you go on, or do you feel like you're in a good spot?
I feel incredibly aligned for this moment in my life. I can't tell you 10 years from now, I think we continue to evolve as humans. And so who knows how it will change, but I feel definitely aligned with the topic area in terms of how I approach my audience or solutions that I offer, different platforms that I'll be on to talk about this. That all may, change over time. But the topic area of sex and sexuality, absolutely 100%. This is where I'm meant to be.
That is such a almost 180 from 2 years ago, though, right? I mean, corporate America is so, I don't know what it was like when you were there, but a couple months ago, it was like suits and very mindful of the things that I'm saying and how I'm saying them, and just making sure it's not even PC, but just being conscious of how people might receive it, especially, as I think you were in leadership too, right? So as you continue to move up, you have to whisper a little bit more to get the same amount of effect, right? Or whatever that saying goes. So how is it different now, and with a message that is, like we talked about, a little uncomfortable sometimes?
Yeah, so you bring up a great point, and that's actually one of the reasons why I left, which was that I felt like I couldn't bring my full self to work. So my full self being like, the person who will wear like boobs on her earrings, and then gets called out for it by her coworker. But I couldn't quite be the radical self that I am. I was definitely adjusting myself to conform to what I thought they needed me to be or how I needed to be. And it was incredibly stifling, in terms of, I felt like I had to adjust every day to bring this, like, today on top of mind is, these metrics that, like, this is not me. Why do we all talk like this? None of us talk like this outside of work. So why are we doing this? It seems like the biggest lie, and we would all be better if we brought our full authentic selves to our jobs, and did it in a way that brought all of our creativity together. Yeah. And that just wasn't a place that allowed for that. And coming out of that, it's definitely been a journey of constantly reminding myself that I'm on my own. I can be as radical as I want to be. I can be my full self, even, dressing for this conversation with you today. Like, for some reason, I went for this, like, I grabbed this collared shirt out of my, like, a blouse out of my closet, and I put it on and was like, why am I wearing this? This is not corporate America. It's not a meeting I'm going to. I don't need to dress like that anymore. And it's been 2 years, but it's so ingrained in my head of this like professional type, professional looks like that. And if you don't look like that or speak like that, then you're somehow less respected or less valued, or your opinion doesn't matter.
I think that's such a good point, though, of feeling like you have to speak or look or act a certain way to get the respect or to check the box and continue to move up if that's what you want. Because I remember, I got invited to a really nice dinner on Friday I couldn't make. It was the first time I had to wear a suit in, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna put my suit back on. And I remember looking at make sure the belt matched the shoes and the watch. And I'm like, I want to be my sweats right now. Like, this is not what I want to do. And then knowing I have to make fake talk, or not fake talk, but small talk with a table of strangers, it didn't feel right. And it's so interesting that you recognized your two selves, right? Your work self and then your other self. Because Tanya and I talked about that. And Tanya's really good about her work talk,
Yeah.
But it's cool to see how you navigated that. And would you say you're happier now that you have taken that leap?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I wouldn't say yes. If I had to answer, give you one answer, yes.
Sure.
The complexity of it is that fulfilling, at least for me, to work on my own vision, even if I'm working a lot of hours, is going towards something that I feel is incredibly needed, impactful, purposeful in this world, and that makes it so much more rewarding than what I was doing before. The downside being the part that can create a lot more anxiety that I had before was just all the unknowns of your financial, health, your stability is entirely dependent on yourself and your own ability to make your business work. Whereas before, you were given tasks to do, you knew you had a paycheck coming every month, and you could really there was some assurance there, some confirmation that no matter what happens, I'll have this paycheck coming. on your own, you don't get that anymore. And
Right.
so it's a new place, for me to be. I'd never taken this much risk before, been in such an unstable place before.
Ever?
But,
At the
you
scale?
know, I mean, not to this scale. Yeah, at this point, I, have a mortgage, and unfortunately, and incredibly fortunate that my husband has a
Sure.
stable job. So we still have his income, but it's not, enough to cover everything. So, people who do it all on their own by themselves, still having a mortgage and everything, that's a whole nother level of risk. But
Yeah, I don't know how they do it, and it's so cool because hearing you take that leap is reassuring because I made a similar leap a few months ago. Can I ask how much did you plan or prep before you pulled the trigger? Like, did you have
well,
a little nest egg, or are you like, no, it's time to go?
no, I definitely had savings, and that carried me over for a while. And I used some of that savings to invest into business coaching programs
Great.
when I first left McKesson. So fortunately, as a coach, you're all by yourself, and most of it's virtual. Um, there's not much capital you need to get started.
Yeah.
Um, but I did have savings that I knew I would need to carry me over until things really got started. I started coaching part-time about 9 months prior to
Okay.
leaving McKesson. So I wanted to I already had clients, and was already marketing myself in that way on social media so that people, got a sense of who I am, what I was doing, starting to build an audience. And I actually wasn't planning on pulling the trigger that much at that time.
Yeah.
I had spoken to my manager and said, hey, is it possible for me to work part-time? Just so like slowly.
Right.
That's
Right.
my style, like slowly, let's get there, not like all at once.
Yeah.
And so I said, can I work part-time to start easing, out of the job? And she said, honestly, I need someone full-time in your role. I just can't have someone part-time, because there was that much work to do that it
Yeah.
just didn't make sense for me to be part-time. And I said, well, I knew that this was the moment. There was something in my gut that said, if you don't leave now, you'll never leave. And you'll
Oh,
get stuck in this life of like the grind and just keep going, and they'll start offering you more money and you'll take it because it looks nice, but it comes with so much more work and pressure and stress and responsibility that you don't want. And I just saw it all playing out.
yeah.
And when she said you can't do part-time, you either stay in what you're doing or leave, I said, okay, then I'm out. And we decided on like a 2 month um, like exit plan.
Yeah.
So I had a delayed exit, but that was it. I left. I figured this is the universe telling me, like, kicking my butt out. Like, you gotta make this jump.
I love that. I'm so proud of you. I think a lot of
Thanks.
people, yeah, I think execution is probably the hardest part sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of planning in place, and some people have amazing plans. I've talked to people who have, 5, 10 year plans, by the month. And it's like, okay, it looks really good. And then it never happens. So whatever catalyst was there for you to go after it, and you're still doing it 2 years later and doing well from what I can tell. I'm just really proud of you. That's so amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. But I think part of it though is you found purpose in work, right? So how did you, or why did you make that transition to talk about sexuality and with women, versus what you were starting to do in the beginning?
Yeah. So that was really pivotal for me. I was working with an energy coach through one of the business coaching programs that I had enrolled
Yeah.
in. And he was the one who brought me to the idea of your purpose comes from your pain.
Love
And
that.
it was, the reason he brought it up was really so that I could start healing those wounds for myself, that I had healed for myself. Those wounds being, I grew up with repressing my sexuality. I grew up heavily religious in the Catholic Church, which I'm no longer part of,
Mm,
and was taught so much shame around sexuality, in particular female sexuality. So I have an older brother, and I saw such a double standard of how my parents and just the church and the world saw
Yeah.
my brother and, you know, his like sexual or whatever activity, and how, you know, I was seen, and how it was, it's not something to be explored. It was something to shut down. It was something to repress. It was sinful. It was dirty. It was tainted. It was impure. You know, it's not something you go near at all, or else there will be repercussions. If not even, you know, just, you know, pregnancy always being a scare as a teenager, but also just, you know, this is your image. This is the family's image. This is, you know, if you have sex before you're married, like that's it. There's no going back. You will be full of regret and remorse. And, you know, it was just so heavy, and shame being the biggest one. And so I absorbed so much shame from that. And as I went through life, I mean, this is something I carried with me through college. I went to a Catholic university, of course, Notre Dame. So the same, you know, sort of feelings were carried through there, and the same messages were presented, you know, there as well. You know, funny enough, as things happen, I had a boyfriend at the time through college, and I got kicked out of the dorm sophomore year for for getting caught spending the night in his dorm room, because
Really?
we had separate sex dorms, and we had what were called parietals. So you're not allowed to be in the opposite sex dorm after a certain hour.
It's in
And
college?
a lot of people would, yes, yeah. A lot of people would break parietals and of course never get caught. But because this is my life and this is just what happens to me, we were sleeping. It's a whole funny story, but basically we got caught. And what I'm saying is like how strict this is on at Catholic campuses, or at least Notre Dame. We got kicked off campus, could not live on campus because we had infringed the feeling of pure community or whatever shit they said about it.
I had no idea.
Yeah, if that was just getting caught like in the opposite sex dorm. If you get caught having sex or you're pregnant, like you get expelled.
Wait, you can't be pregnant as a student?
So we never saw them. They like if you got pregnant,
You never saw them?
we
it's
never
like,
no, literally we never saw them. Like they got put to some dorm, I don't even know, off campus, like some secluded area just for pregnant students. Like I don't know, we never saw them. It was so weird. So just saying that was like a big part of my upbringing, and it, you know, it took me a long time. It took going to Boston, where I went for grad school, being around women that were open and comfortable with their sexuality, seeing that example, because I never had that example before in my life of women that were really open and have accepted their sexuality as something that is just so natural, and really advocated for their own pleasure, and allowed themselves to explore it and be free with that. And it's really when I started to come into my own acceptance of my sexuality and, allow that to be free. But this had been a pain of mine for so many years that still in some communities, it comes up, like with my family, because, it's not a conversation that I grew up being comfortable, talking about. It's not something that we ever spoke about. There was just so much silence. I never got to talk or anything like that. So I healed these wounds for myself and really, live a different, sexual life now and present myself differently. But as I was going through my business, and what this energy coach was working me through was, you've been through that pain, you can help other women get there. And through that process, I realized like I was never meant to be a nutrition coach or just a nutrition coach. Like I was meant to go at a deeper level, really into a taboo topic that no one wants to touch, because this is where the real pain is for people. People that have gone through sexual trauma, that are dealing with a lot of wounds and shame. There's, religion, there's the societal messages. There's so many women out there with so much pain. but there's so much freedom on the other side. So I shifted my business to that, to be able to help women with that.
Was there an aha moment like, oh, this makes sense, or this feels better, or flows better, or was it more of a gradual transition?
Well, there was actually there was one moment that was really incredible. So I I started to think about making this transition actually in April, about the end of April of last year of 2019. And it was right after I had a freak accident in Mexico where I ended up with a broken nose and a concussion, a big gash on the back of my head. So I had a month that I literally couldn't do anything but lay on the couch to heal from the concussion. So it was during that time that I started to write a book and really think about, what am I doing? What kind of life do I want to return to after this near-death experience? And I realized, like, no, I need to be doing what's really important to me. And it's scary as fuck because no one wants to talk about sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell my parents that this is what I'm doing.
Do they know?
Of course, they know now. Yeah, at least my mom knows a lot. We talk about it a lot. My dad, we just kind of avoid the subject. But just in general, like, do I want to put this on my LinkedIn where my old coworkers, are connected to me and will see it? I mean, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to break into this area. So I was scared and I was digging my heels in a lot, but there was something in me that knew, no, this is where you're supposed to go. And I know it's scary, but this is where you're supposed to go. And so I went with that. And that next month in May was actually a retreat with all of the people that I had gone through that 3-month business coaching program with previously in that year. So we all met in Arizona for a weekend in May. And one of the exercises that we had to do that weekend was, without preparation, they said, okay, y'all are each going to go up one by one in front of the rest of the group and give a 1-minute pitch on your business. And going into the weekend, I was still kind of toying with this idea of like sex code, sexuality, but I wasn't exactly sure what is my core message, who exactly is my audience, what will I be doing? And so then we get down to this without prep, because they kind of presented it like, y'all have been in your businesses now for a couple of years, you know what your message is and all of that. We just want you to practice giving a pitch, and we're going to record you. And so I'm sitting there like, oh shit, what am I going to say?
You got to choose, huh?
Like, I literally and I knew that I was going to do sexuality, but I didn't know what I was going to say because I hadn't refined my message. I had literally just that day decided, like, I'm going for this.
Yeah.
So everyone's going, and they were all health coaches, like personal trainers. And so they're all going up and talking about, like, counting macros or whatever. And I'm sitting there like, I'm going to shit my pants. So nervous. I didn't know what I was going to say. And literally I sat there and just like closed my eyes. I envisioned myself speaking, with my full spirit and like the full force of my soul, and asked all the ancestors to just be with me and speak through me, everything that I was supposed to say, and just like really centered myself on, I know this is exactly where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. So just please let it flow out of me. And I planned like the first 4 words of what I was going to say. The rest, I just said, fuck it. Like, I could probably even remember maybe it wasn't 4. It was like the first phrase. It was, I remember. I grew up a vehement virgin for God.
Ooh.
That was the first thing that came to me.
I'd read that book.
Nice. I'm gonna put that in my book.
Good. Yeah, that's attention grabbing.
So I went out there and I started with that, and the rest just like I can't even tell you. It was the most magical, mystical, transformational experience. I didn't stutter. There was not a single like it was as if I had practiced this, 10 times. And everything came out of me like I couldn't even keep it in. The words were just bellowing out of me. And it was this feeling of alignment that I had never experienced in my whole life.
Oh,
And after that moment, I knew this is hands down. I have no question. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. This feels so right.
you can't turn back after experiencing that.
No, and I haven't. Yeah.
Why just couldn't even you wouldn't be able to, right? You just feel so guilty, feeling such acceptance, self-acceptance, bliss for yourself, understanding, and then being like, nope, not gonna go down that road for whatever reason. There's no way.
Right. And those are the things that I remind myself of when entrepreneurship gets really hard and,
Yeah.
as it is, and especially during a time of like 2020 when, people have other priorities. They're not necessarily, thinking that while sex may be terrible and they never receive, pleasure, or it's constantly bad, or they have a lot of, trauma wounds, it may not be their first priority to hire a sex coach or, join a group program. It may be just trying to make sure the rent is paid each month. And,
Yeah.
so there's of course always going to be challenges with being a small business and, still being on my own and navigating all of that. But I keep coming back to that purpose, that there is, a reason that I was brought here, and there's a reason that I started this, and it is affirming that I get a lot of really great response on the stuff that I post on social media, and just more and more I am reassured that there's women out there and men that need this and are paying attention, and I can't turn back. This has to be done.
You mentioned earlier about growing up and seeing the differences between sex around you and then your brother, right? And I from a male experience, I just remember it was encouraged, and I think encouraged is the best way to do it. Is like I remember the joke was if I were to ever get caught in school, my mom would probably yell at me and my dad would probably shake my hand behind her back. Right? Like that, like that's the kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
how could you, son? How was it? Right? I mean, that's kind
Right,
of the
right.
it's almost normal. I mean, with all the guys that I talk to, and I can't even imagine what it would be like, not because it's unimaginable, just but because it's so different, that experience. And then growing up and now you're in college or post college and you're free, you having all of these things. Um, how did you begin to start exploring or understanding this part of your world and your life?
Yeah. Are you saying specifically like how to have sex or how to accept my sexuality?
I guess a little bit of both. I mean, they almost go hand in hand when you start having that conversation, right? Like just um or as you become active, you start to talk about it with other people who maybe are active, and then you share some experiences, and then you're like, oh well, is that normal, is that not normal, or how does this work? And and that's how some truth is shed, and that's how some myths are shared as well. So what does that beginning stage look like when you start to have these conversations with people?
Yeah. So I would actually argue that sex and sexuality don't always go
Okay.
hand in hand. So I would say on the sexuality part, I often in my materials refer to it as your sexual self. So that part of you is, being connected to that part of your body can, you can express that part of yourself in many different ways. You can express that part of you during sex, during the act
Okay.
of sex, and that could look like, how does your body want to move during sex? For one woman, it may be like, I really like to move my hips around a lot. One other woman may not be like really, connected with those kind of movements, and instead like really likes to flip her hair around. Or like, how do I like to dress? Like one woman maybe really feel really sexy in lingerie. The other one maybe really feel really sexy in like a crop top and sweatpants.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
All those things are under your sexual self. Being connected to your sexuality, you defining what is your sexuality, what feels good for you versus what society has said, like, in order to be sexy, you have to look like this and wear that and move like this. You know, that's something that was placed on us instead of being able to define for yourself. And like I was saying, for me, to give an example, growing up, my sexuality that was placed on me was shut it down.
I see what you're saying.
It doesn't belong here. So I didn't even get a chance to define what it would mean for me. All I knew, the only definition I had of it was that it was wrong and impure and it doesn't belong anywhere until I'm married. And then like, I don't, so I don't know what was supposed to happen at that point. But anyways, so I would say as from childhood on, we basically don't normalize any of those conversations in terms of sexuality. And that's, you know, not even touching on the conversation of like, who are you attracted to? You know, are you attracted to the opposite sex, if not, you know, same sex? But for me as a dancer, I grew up as a dancer doing ballet and jazz and now salsa, but I found out pretty early on when I started with jazz, this was probably like 9th grade or so, that, you know, we were doing body rolls and hip rolls and stuff. And there was something inside of me that was like, ooh, that feels good.
I know exactly what you're talking about now. Okay, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like that to me was that fire that I call my sexual self, that even at that age was like, this is a way for me to express that part of myself that no other, you know, no other avenue in my life allowed for that kind of expression. Everything else was just, you show up as like the good girl, the perfectionist, straight A student, But the body rolls, the fire, the like, you know, that was another side of me that in this place, it was allowed to some extent. I still felt very ashamed, even doing body rolls and hip rolls.
Really?
Because of how much we sexualize girls, even at 14 years old. Well, maybe especially at 14 years old, because now you're like a teenager and you're starting to, you know, develop a butt and all this stuff. Probably, even because of that, at that age, I wanted to do it, but then I also felt ashamed and would hold back instead of fully expressing myself and fully dancing. I was worried. I was worried that like, I'm going to do this in front of my parents for the recital. What is my mom going to think?
See, I don't even think that as a guy.
Well, of course you don't.
I know. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I'm realizing like just, I mean, how lucky or privileged I am. Just like when I go on stage and I, you know, body roll or whatever, you know, people scream and it's just like, it's expected. And even if it's awkward, it's funny, right? You know, it's like not even, I can't go wrong on stage as a dancer understanding this, right? And then I appreciate you breaking that down though, because now I think I understand, because I think when we teach it in class, I break it down for like the act of sex versus dancing sensually, right? Or like a connection with your body. Am I getting close here?
Yeah. Right. And they are different. However, if you carry a lot of shame or stigma around sex or any form of afraid of looking sexual, and that's the thing, because we sexualize girls so much, even from a really young age. Like my niece at 2 years old was like slithering around on the floor because she loves to dance. And, you know, my brother, her dad was like, oh no, like what if she ends up on the pole? And I was like, how dare you?
At 2?
At 2. How dare you?
Yeah.
Like we put our adult eyes, you know, that have been conditioned by this world onto children and sexualize their movements when all they're doing is just moving. They're just moving. They don't know any difference. And that's the same thing I was doing at 14. I wasn't doing that because I saw some TikTok of like some girls twerking, some older girls twerking and want to imitate them. We didn't have social media then.
Yeah.
I was literally just dancing, just moving my body, like you do in jazz. But still the fear of knowing what these movements mean, I was already very aware of that. I was aware of that at 7. So my earliest memories at 7, where I was like doing this little sequence with a friend of mine in front of my grandmother to, I think it was like the Tootsie Roll song. And there was a hip roll in it. And I was afraid to do it in front of her. At 7, I had already strongly absorbed that message.
That's so young.
That's not what good girls do.
Oh, wow. Do you
Yeah.
feel, are you worried about her judgment, or are you also feeling embarrassed and self-shame for that?
I think there was both. There was both. I mean, I think at that age, like, I was also the kind of child who was very much a parent pleaser. I was, the one who like wanted to do everything well. So if they said that was wrong and shameful, then I was going to say, it's okay, then yeah, it's also wrong and shameful, and telling myself, don't do that. So I was looking for that, for that approval, definitely. And I knew my grandma was conservative. But the funny thing is that she told me after I did the little sequence, she was like, you need to move more, like really move your hips. And I was like, what, grandma? Yeah, she surprised me. But anyways, like in terms of for girls, that's a really big thing, because there is the fear of being sexualized and not wanting to. There's this really hard line of, even as adult women struggle with this a lot, of not being able to control when we're sexualized by men, and also not wanting to show that we're trying to bring on that kind of attention. And then where in that line are you able to then just fully be yourself and express yourself?
God, there's so much to think about. Like,
I'm telling you, we could stay here for
that's probably like not even a daily, but it's like
an
hourly, as you're out and about thing, right?
All the time. And add on to that layer, that's just a normal person existing in this world. Add on to that layer sexual trauma,
right?
Which is rampant.
It's insane.
Child sexual abuse. It's like, I don't remember the statistics, but I will say that of the 25 interviews I did of random women for my blog, 85% had been abused as children.
That's so scary.
By family members.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it typically somebody you know or in the family?
Yeah, by family members.
Is that because they have access? Is that just the proximity of it? That's so scary to me.
Yeah,
because
it's very rarely strangers.
Well, because I know at least 10 women in my life. That means 8.5 of them, right?
Yes, it has happened.
And I only know a couple of them, so they're out there still, and it breaks my heart so bad. And oh man, anyway. But
so what I'm saying is, like, you add on trauma, whether it's childhood trauma or you were taken advantage of, raped, all the layers of consent or non-consensual sex that happen through teenage years and adulthood.
Yeah.
You add on to that these women in the world are now also trying to navigate not wanting to get abused again. And so there's another layer of protection around their body, to not wanting to be sexualized by men, not wanting to be, always kind of keeping a barrier.
Yeah.
There, which can show up in how they present themselves just out in public, trying to reduce their femininity.
Yeah.
So that, so that they're, doesn't look like they're trying to grab attention or don't get any attention from men. Yes.
Yeah.
And then it also shows up a lot once they have loving relationships, if they're married or in long-term committed relationships, it shows up a lot in not being able to really have, get to that level of intimacy, really enjoy sex, because it's just incredibly triggering. There's so much unresolved PTSD from sexual trauma.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it. I'm glad this is a great segue right now. Just sex in a relationship, right? So in your experience and your coaching, your conversations, when is when is the appropriate time for that to happen in a relationship that you find? And the first time, what is a healthy way to go about it? Because in my mind, growing up, there's one way, and then now as an adult, as a man, as a father and a husband, like that's was it inappropriate, but it could have been done much better, right? Or
Hmm.
we could have fostered this relationship better, or there's
Hmm.
so many things we could have done differently. And so I'm just wondering from from your perspective and your advice, what would you say?
So the biggest thing is communication. That has to be priority, hands down. So we're talking about getting into a physical, intimate relationship with someone. The first thing to think about is talking about it. Before you even want to get
Yeah,
to touching them, you need to have a conversation about it. Because without that, I mean, you're literally giving yourself access, permission to touch this other person's body without knowing what they like, how
yeah,
they like it, if what to notice or what to be aware of if they don't like it, when to pull back, how to
yeah.
check in with them. So the very first thing is you have to establish trust and safety through communication. So anyone that has experienced trauma, and I would say this is probably even for people who haven't experienced sexual trauma, safety is going to be first and foremost, particularly just with living in a patriarchal world where men typically have more strength anyways, and if there's any sort of like power dynamic where they have more power in a
Yeah.
relationship, a woman will not be able to let go during sex and really enjoy it and like let herself feel the pleasure without feeling safe. So she needs to feel safe to know that, okay, this guy's not going to just like bulldoze me or like, take advantage of me. Or if I say, no, that really doesn't feel good, like, can you stop?
Yeah.
Trusting that he will actually stop, because a lot of times they don't. It just
That's so insane to me.
feel good for him. And so he's like, no, I'm just going to keep going. As she's like, I said, stop. Why aren't you stopping? And like, as you, with PTSD, there's the freeze response is most common with
Yeah. The third F that no one talks about, right?
flight, fight, or freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah. Freeze is the most common, particularly with sex. And so it's, just you end up in like this frozen, I don't know what to do. And then like as he like,
Yeah.
comes all over you, and then you have like this was just an experience for him. He basically masturbated with your body.
Masturbated with your body. That's a crazy way to put it.
As actually, as a client recently told me, what her grandma would always tell her was that when he does that, and this is like in a marriage relationship, when y'all have sex and she doesn't want to, but he doesn't take no for an answer, that it's
That's
like
rape.
he's
I mean,
going to the bathroom on you, like just
yeah,
using you as a toilet.
that's uh that's tough to hear. I almost want to apologize like guys, but I know I can't do that. But it's so unfortunate because I love Taylor so much, and I love just everyone in my life. I can't even imagine her not feeling good during sex, right? Like, and that's just such a different conversation than maybe 17, 18-year-old me who not necessarily didn't care, just didn't understand or didn't know, right? Like, I automatically assumed if I was feeling good, you were feeling good, right?
Yeah.
Or or that, the only way to feel good was vaginally, right? Because
Right.
that's the only way, like, I really, I mean, at the time was like, I think that's the only way I like it, right? Like, I put it
Yeah.
in, you feel good, I feel good. I mean, I just didn't
Mm.
know any better. And then I always think about that scene. Do you watch Friends?
Yeah.
There's that scene Rachel's trying to explain to Chandler how to have sex with a girl. She draws a diagram. She's like, you hit one, you hit 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 7, 7. And I'm like, right? Like, come on, I don't get it. But then it's so true talking to you and other women. It's like, how do you, what are healthy ways for women to begin exploring that? And then for me as a man, I mean, I'm never going to hook up with another girl ever again, except for Taylor, of course. But just
Mhm.
anyone listening, how did they figure out what you like, what you don't like, and besides talking about it, how to do that together or separately or?
Yeah. So actually, separately is much better.
Okay.
Um, so, as I mentioned, like communication is a big thing. Well, part of the way our society and trauma and all these things that we've already talked about, the way it sets up men and women so differently to come into a sexual relationship together, a lot of women get to their adult years without knowing what they like. So,
Oh yeah.
so your partner could ask you, if you happen to get a male partner who's really self-aware and has taught themselves a lot on this topic, you're lucky to get one like that who asks you, before you even sit down to ever have sex, like, hey, what do you like? And it doesn't have to be this robotic, like scientific,
I love that.
biological
I just love being that
conversation.
comfortable.
Yeah, it can be super intimate and fun and sexy and close and kind of playful and like,
Yeah.
hey, what do you like? Does this feel good? And kind of start to play around with different sort of like touches. But a lot of women are so disconnected from their body because of all the things that we've talked about that they don't even know what they like or haven't felt permission to even explore on their own through self-touch, through masturbation. So they may not even really know, like, and that doesn't mean that they're virgins. They could have had sex before, vaginal penetrative sex and never climaxed, never really felt good. They just did it because, like, I don't know, that's what he likes. And so that's what we're supposed to do in a relationship.
Yeah.
I get that response all the time from my clients. And so if you come to adulthood in that place, you have to take time on your own to connect with your body. And that's the main thing that my group program, Uncover Your Sexual Self, focuses on is reconnecting with yourself and defining your sexuality for yourself. And for the first time, figuring out what feels good for me, moving slow or moving fast, being teased or going straight for it or wearing this or that or kind of, so playing with different things until you figure out what feels good for you. But what I recommend, for anyone out there watching is that if you're just starting this process for yourself as a female, is to just start with self-touch. And I don't mean masturbation because that can be scary for people who've never done it before, who are just starting this journey, but just self-touch. So just getting comfortable with caressing your own skin. This gets you connected to your body and out of your mind that's just trying to push yourself to like it. Like, oh, if I just really focus during sex, like I'll get myself to climax, or I'll like, maybe what he's doing right now feels painful, but maybe I can get myself to like it. Honestly, there's so many women out there that are trying to do that. And it
Hold
never
on.
works.
It's painful. What if I say that last part again?
If I get myself to focus, then maybe I'll like it.
The focus made you like it. Let me sit on that for a second. Is that real? Is that possible?
That's real.
No,
it's not possible.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking to myself, like, in my own life, like, if I smack my leg enough, will I like it? You know what I mean? Like, does that, like, how does that translate? Yeah.
No, there's a couple of things there. Like one thing that can happen for people who, still have PTSD from trauma is that during sex they will disassociate. And if he's doing something, if he's trying to pleasure you or, whatever is happening, you may like mentally check out because it's pulling up, trauma
that makes sense.
for you.
Yeah.
So part of that is healing the PTSD and reconnecting to your body. And then maybe you would actually like what he's doing. That's kind of a separate thing. The other part that I'm talking about is like what he's doing actually doesn't feel good, which a lot of times is just, not much foreplay, a lot of penetration, really fast, over and done like that. And a lot of women don't know that they can ask for something different, to speak
Like, it doesn't
up
have to
and
be
say
that way.
like, it doesn't have to be that way. Exactly. And that, you know, unfortunately, a
But
lot
it
of
seems
women
so
have also
selfish.
incredibly selfish,
Like,
but you know
that's the word I
what?
want to use.
It's incredibly selfish, incredibly selfish. The only benefit of the doubt I can give to some men, I won't say all because this doesn't apply to all, but to
Sure.
some is what you said about when you were younger, is not knowing. Know that literally no woman felt comfortable enough to say like, hey, that actually doesn't feel good. Can we try something different? And so you
Yeah.
just kept doing what you were taught. You just kept doing what you knew and thought like, well, if this feels good for me, it must feel good for her too.
And it could be such a weird spiral, right? Especially if you have two inexperienced partners and the guy's like, I think I'm doing it right. And she doesn't know any better. She goes, oh, it felt so good, thinking that's it's supposed to. And so it reinforces the guy to do it again down the road. And she maybe begins to like it or not, is what I'm
Probably
hearing
not.
now.
Yeah.
And you put that post up, I think it was this week or last week, about being in your head during sex. Uh, how often does that happen? Because as a man, that's scary. I'm like, oh, what is she thinking? What is happening right now? You know what I mean? I mean, especially in the earlier stages. Like now, my wife and I are so connected. You know, it's beautiful every time, and it's just, But I can't even imagine the beginning again, being like, what are they thinking? This is working. I mean, that's probably the communication part you're talking about. But
Yeah.
I will say this to the guys though, because I know I have a couple young ones listening. It's okay if you don't get there trying to figure it out. Like, you can have batting practice without going in. Like, it's okay, dude. Like, she might appreciate it more and come back for later if you take the time now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's kind of this idea that we, like, when you start having sex, that you need to jump to penetration, like that's what she's waiting for and like wants right away. And that's not the case. That's
Yeah.
not the case at all. Most women really enjoy foreplay, and it's really important to get really warmed up
Mm.
before ever going to penetration. And there's a lot of great sex that doesn't even involve penetration. And for some people, like they have actual physiological issues, like such as recently giving birth to a child. There's
Oh yeah.
other like vaginal problems, like tightening of the vaginal canal that doesn't allow for penetrative sex. And sometimes it can just be painful. People that have pelvic inflammatory disorder, which is really common, is also one, that can make it really painful. So there's so many options outside of what you see in the movies that are available to people that are having sex. You just need to get creative. But the biggest thing, again, I'll come back to communication,
I
is
like that.
talking before you even get into the bedroom, to be able to talk about what kind of things do we want to explore with. Do we want to bring vibrators into it? Do we want to try other toys?
Yeah.
What are the
And it's
things that
okay.
it is okay.
Because I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of men, if you bring up the idea of bringing toys into the bedroom, there's a little bit of ego that kicks in, right? And they're like, well, is my D not good enough? That may not be the case, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is what I'm saying, is that the messages that women have received that's created, the feminist movements and all of that, are not about bashing men. It's
Sure.
about getting us to this place of awareness about each other. So wanting men to be aware of how women feel pleasure and what feels good for them. And for a lot of women, it's that they cannot climax through penetration alone. They need stimulation on the clitoris
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the same time, or maybe they just have clitoral orgasms. And so they're only going to get to climax if they have, a vibrator on the clitoris, or, if you like, give them head and can stimulate it that way, or with your fingers or some other way. And so that's just physiological. I mean, there's nothing
Right.
wrong with, your penis. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just the matter of fact of the way the body is shaped. And so it's, part of these feminist movements and all of that and speaking up for women is to make men aware that for all this time, women haven't been able to say that, or when they did try to speak up, like you mentioned, the male ego can be very fragile. And
Don't say that. That
and he
hurts.
blew up. Exactly. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And then of course she's never going to speak up again or be afraid, the next partner
I
she
don't even think
has.
about that part. Yeah.
Exactly. This is why so many women have a hard time speaking up. It just, it makes me so mad. So, and on the other side, also, these feminist movements are also trying to break down what you hear about now, hypermasculinity, like the ways that men have been repressed by these ridiculous notions of like, if she doesn't climax or if it doesn't feel good for her, then there's something wrong with your penis. What? What?
We're fragile.
But why is that? Why are you giving, why is it your responsibility if like, the bodies are just not made that way? Why is that kind of pressure put on you and in such a way created this, this like, this is my masculinity. And it's,
Yeah.
what I
I,
mean?
I will say, from my experience, I think that comes from, it's very caveman brain, right? It's like my one job is to reproduce. And if she isn't happy or climaxing or whatever it is, there's a little bit too of uh, like I can't do my job if she's not happy, or if she's not happy, then she'll leave. And so no, I can't reproduce, right? That's a caveman. So I think that's part of it. On top of the ego, on top of, we're not gonna talk about this outside the bedroom, but if I look at you, right, you should know what happened last night. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of
Mm.
machismo in it. So it's so crazy. And the male repression, that's interesting. I,
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I don't know. Blow my mind, doc. Uh, I think it's there. I'm trying to think of my own experiences. So I'll share that early on. Um, I was probably one of the last ones in my group of friends to have sex, right? And that's just for one reason or another. I just never wanted to, never needed to. And I remember when I finally did, it was with this girl who I barely knew, and she was um prepositioning me. And I remember being like, I don't really want to, but in my mind going, yo, it's your job. Like if she wants, I go and you're done. And I remember thinking to myself my first time being like, this is whack. This is so weird. And from that moment on, I really understood right away, like sex would be a intimate thing, an emotional thing for me. Like one night stands are not really a thing for me. I know there's a lot of guys that can do that, a lot of women that can do that too. It just wasn't for me. But I remember other instances of women approach me that way, saying and giving, offers, and having be like, nah, I don't wanna, and feeling guilty about it. Uh I'm trying to think of it. I repressed it, oppressed it. Yeah, I remember feeling super guilty. And then the next time with the girl being like heads up, like, hey, I don't wanna right away. Because I like you. And I know that sounds super cheesy and like it's not a line. Like I don't want to do that. And I remember some girls really appreciating that and some not. And that really surprising me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not knowing how to navigate that.
But what got you to that place of being able to say, no, I don't want to do that yet because I really like you?
Uh my mom probably. I don't know. Like, it I mean, it's I've always been really I love being in relationships. I'm a relationship guy. There's those kind of guys. And to me, just realizing the first time how it was cold, it was weird, I don't even know. I'm pretty sure I finished. I don't even remember. Like I don't even think about it anymore because I was so embarrassed about it. And I remember, and it was so typical. Like I was so embarrassed about it because I wanted it to be special, right? I mean, the first time, and I just remember it was like in a hotel room bathroom, like at a party, and I was like, and getting out of the bathroom, and then everyone's like high fiving me. I'm like, this is, it was not great. I don't know why we're
Yeah.
celebrating right now. And I just didn't understand it. And so because of that, I wanted it from then on to be not mutual, but just with someone that would be around later. I know that sounds super
Mhm.
cheesy, right? But um, I wanted to trust them, and I got some stuff from back in the day too, where that's a reason, but I just wanted to do that. So when I finally found, Taylor now, we purposely had a very long courtship, right? And she would wanted to be in a relationship, and I told her for months, I was like, I cannot be in this relationship right now. I don't want to do it. And she was my one of my best friends up to that point already, right? And so that transition was so weird, and I didn't understand why, if we were already homies and she's my best friend, why I wouldn't be able to. And it's such a
Mhm.
different, why is, let me ask you this then, why is the physical aspect of it, why does that change the dynamic of a relationship so much, you think?
I don't know. I think everyone would answer that question differently for
Mm,
themselves. But it's definitely for some people they can jump in and out of a physical relationship with
sure,
someone.
yeah.
Um, but for a lot of people, just that next level of physical intimacy can connect you to a person that just feels so different than what you were doing before that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure exactly, and I'm not sure that there's like one reason for it. But what I would say with what you were saying about, I think it's great that you were able to identify that you didn't like the one night stand, or doing it with someone that you weren't in a
Yeah.
relationship with, and be able to say that it's okay for me as a man to say I only want to have sex with people that I'm in a relationship with, and in a long-term relationship, and
Yeah.
actually verbalize that, and have the courage to verbalize that, while you have your male friends around you, and even like your dad or whoever,
Yeah.
saying like, the higher your count, the more high fives you get, the more of a
Oh, yeah.
man you are.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot and this is the part of like the hypermasculinity where it can be really detrimental to like the male self, like to your own self. This is not even, it impacts
Yeah.
women, of course, in so many
Yeah.
ways
Yeah.
as well. But it's how this is even, oppressing you, in that like a lot of men out there are just like you and want to be able to say like, no, I don't like that kind of sex, but feel like they have to prove themselves as a man to get their count up.
Yeah, it's weird. And I told you this morning or this afternoon, with my son getting older and having already heard people say to him, he's a cute kid, you better watch out, and all these things, kind of like your niece, wiggling around on the
Mm-hmm.
ground, and hearing that, and for the first time as a man feeling uncomfortable for my son, and knowing his, what he's gonna do is what he's gonna do, and that's, it is what it is. But just wanting to almost protect him from it. But I guess here's a good conversation too: is, what does sex education look like? How do you think I would appropriately expose him to some of these things, educate him to it, and not just on the physical, right? I mean, it's very easy to talk biology. I think it's probably the easier way to do it, but to talk more about the relationships it can build and or destroy, or what does that do for you and other people?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love that you're thinking about this for your son. because most parents only think about it if they have daughters, and in the sense of trying to protect them,
Oh
which
yeah.
understandably there's a lot of danger out there. But what the other side of being so protective of a little girl, like you mentioned, if you have a second child, you're afraid that it's a girl, that it would be a girl, is that, creates this idea that you are so fragile and so
Okay.
quickly could be victimized,
Yeah.
because of the fact that you're a girl, because of you have a vulva, that
Mm.
you're immediately sexualized at this young age, and it's this thing that is, you can't do anything about it. You're born with this, and you're born with this body, but it's going to attract older men and men that want to take advantage of you. And it also takes away the idea that women have their own sexuality, that is okay, that
Yeah.
it's a good thing. So you have the ability to say yes if you want to, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a dirty girl, doesn't make you a bad girl, doesn't make you a hoe.
Yeah.
It's like you can say yes because it's a normal thing to be sexual. So it's a lot of messages out there, but we mostly focus on the girls and how to protect them from being, victimized, from abuse. But where really the focus should be is on how do we raise our boys differently so they're not taking advantage of girls. They're
Yes.
not raping them, so that they're not taught that they have, guaranteed access to any woman's body, that the higher the count, makes them more of a man. We need to throw away all of that shit.
Oh
So
yeah.
it starts with raising the boys differently. And so I'm so glad that that's high on your mind, and that you've thought about that for your son. And what I think at this age, at a very young age, mostly, with boys, what it starts with is consent around touching. So one of the things
Okay.
that isn't ever really, spoken about is consent to be touched, or to touch others, particularly boys with girls. So, as he gets older, say around 5, 6 years old, he's starting to get to an age where he's going to be around a lot of other girls, around his age, maybe with his mom, with your wife will want to, as a baby, he's probably used to touching her boobs and kind of putting his hands all over her body, because that's, what you do as a baby.
Yeah.
But as you get older, and he continues to do that, maybe something like, oh, that's, those are mommy's private parts, and so you need to ask before you touch. Because at that age, he's learning what is normal, how to touch other people's bodies. And so if he does that with y'all and thinks it's okay, or with the other women in his life, family members, he could go to, first grade and thinking it's okay to touch other girls anywhere, whether it's, any part of their body, even if it's just their arm or whatever, that it's okay to run up and hug someone. And we want to think that it's okay, that you're just being friendly, but we need to be teaching the language of consent around touching, that you may not want, to be touched at that time, but particularly at that age, just giving some language around not touching private areas.
Yeah.
And that is, it's just important to teach that. And, same thing with himself, in terms of teaching him that other people can't touch, his penis, his private areas, that these are areas that are only for himself. And, to give that language of, you have autonomy over your body, and you can say when you don't want to be touched. Another, even when it comes to touching, another common thread around this time for young kids is forcing them to hug family members.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because we're minorities. And that's big.
Oh, I know. I am too.
It's big. Yeah. And it's, ooh, and I don't know about you, but like there's a part of my family, because part of us grew up in Hawaii too. And so we kiss on the cheek all the time. Right.
Mm,
I remember visiting the mainland during high school and that not being a thing. And I remember getting looks. I'm like, ooh, I crossed that line so fast. But man,
mm.
as a kid, let me ask you this. When he's learning these boundaries, I like how you framed it of it's respecting his body and knowing what the boundaries are for him.
Right.
How do you word that so it's not a shame thing or an embarrassment thing, right? It's just so it's a healthy boundary.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It's a hard line of when it becomes shameful and when it's um, just oh, it's okay, it's okay to set this boundary and that's normal.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I'm not a parent myself, and I still struggle with this. I'm definitely not the expert on parenting or sex ed around this age,
Yeah.
as I deal with mostly adults. But um, the biggest thing to combat shame is to be very open about sex, sexuality, touch, affection. The biggest thing you can do is to allow the conversation to happen because shame can only exist in silence.
Mm,
So if you and your wife are constantly talking about it, just like, you talk about what you had for breakfast. If you talk about it in front of him, of course, in like an age appropriate way,
right.
but if you talk about it in front of him like it's normal, then if he has, as he gets older, if he feels uncomfortable in any way with, like an older uncle who's like getting too close or something, he would feel then more able or feel like he can talk to you about it and tell
Yeah.
you that versus like this is not something we've ever spoken about. I'm not supposed to talk about it. That's
Mhm.
shame. But the more that y'all can talk about it with him and that he sees that example modeled in front of him by you and your wife speaking about it, talking about touch, talking about consent, talking about sex, sexuality, all of those things, give him this example that, oh, yeah, of course we can talk about these things. Of course I can be open with my parents about it and tell them any level of discomfort that I'm feeling because this is a normal kind of conversation that we have. Just like, my parents teach me about shapes and math and, literally
Yeah.
it has
I
to
mean, but
be
then it's
like
not taboo
that.
anymore, right? It's on the
Exactly.
table.
Exactly. Exactly.
I like
Yeah.
that. I
So,
appreciate that a lot. Yeah,
yeah.
being able to talk to them or because I even think about opening that line up so that if something inappropriate does happen, that doorway is open to talk about. Because I remember traveling to somewhere in Asia as a kid, probably like 7 or 8, and some like random dude touched my knee when I was sitting down, and
Hmm.
I was like, "Yo, that feels weird," like right? And I told
Hmm.
my parents, and this is not knock against them because it we just don't know what's going on, right? And they're right next to me, so it's not like it's private, so they're watching, and they're like, "Oh, it's just cultural." And I'm like, "I don't know, like this culture doesn't feel right to me.
Hmm.
Like this is not,
Yeah.
And then, but I remember after that, you know, not bringing it up again. I remember like
Hmm.
punching the dude, like the next time he did it, and I got in trouble for it, but I couldn't talk to him anymore, right? And I remember
Yeah.
talking to my parents about it later on, and they don't even remember, right? They're like, I don't. It's so
Oh, that's
crazy.
memorable. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like the idea of what you're saying of just making it open enough so that when something does happen, they can come and either get help or shed some light on something. That's
That's a great example how you went with what you were feeling, where you were able to
as a
like
kid, you just
notice,
know, right?
yeah, like, no, that wasn't right. And like, I know there, and then, that your parents said like, no, it's cultural and they just, I know they didn't know, any differently at
Right.
the
Yeah.
time or any better, but the fact that you just kind of got silenced and said like, no, that it's not real what you didn't get validated at all.
Happens a lot,
Um,
and I'm a dude.
yeah, exactly.
That's the crazy
Exactly.
that just hit me, and I'm a guy, and it was just on the knee. Oh my gosh, you're messing me up
Well,
right
all of that, but yeah.
now.
all of that. But I see you, obviously, you are planning a different life for your child. And you're planning to be, and already you are a different parent,
Yeah.
for your child. And educating yourself in this way so that your son can be the same way like you, to be able to notice when there's uncomfortable feelings, someone's touching him in the wrong way that feels uncomfortable, and be able to vocalize that to you. And we'll see that you act on it, that you validate what he's saying. You know what? Thank you for telling me that's not right. And then, taking care of it. Then all of those things, he gets reaffirmed. Oh, okay. My parents really will act on it. They'll listen to me when I share something with them. And that just, builds on itself, that he'll continue to want to come to you.
I love that. I appreciate you dropping some bombs there, just because, to your point, you don't deal with a lot of kids, and he's only 2, so I'm really getting really far ahead of him. Maybe not, I don't know. But when he watches this back as a young man, probably in his teens, maybe in his early 20s, navigating the world with women or men, right? Um, what advice would you give him? What little nugget as he begins to explore his sexuality, right? And those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is to go with what your gut is telling you. Like you noticed in that moment of a feeling of discomfort, of knowing when things feel really good and notice when things feel really wrong, and going with the things that feel really good, whether that means you're, attracted to the same sex or opposite sex, or, whatever that means for you. And then at that point, communication. So if he ends up growing up and is attracted to women, and the first thing before ever going to touch them or want to plant a kiss on them or anything in that way, is to, approach them with respect first and foremost, of talking to them like, hey, would it be okay if I kissed you? I'd really like to kiss you right now.
That's adorable.
Asking as you go along until you build that trust, of having your bodies together and allowing each other to explore your bodies, to ask along the way, ask for consent, to know that it's okay. Instead of this idea that you just have permission to women's bodies at whatever you want,
should you always ask before the first kiss?
When do you think you wouldn't?
I mean, sometimes, they give you those Lion King eyes. You know what I'm talking about, those Nala eyes. And I would like to think that's a yes. But then again, I'm thinking, very cautiously, like, it opens the door for other things. So I just go back and forth on it. But I don't know. As a woman, would you always want to ask? Like, does that?
Let me ask you this:
Like,
what is the downside to asking?
I guess my initial fear would be ruining a moment. I think that would be it. And I'm assuming that him or whatever guy or girl is about to go in has some level of game and understands that there's an attraction or something there. So maybe there's a consensual look, but then getting the verbal go ahead. I guess there's really no.
And is ruining a moment worse than kissing someone who didn't want to be kissed?
Oof. Get him. Get him. Yeah. I mean, you're 100% right, though. You're 100% right.
I say this because sometimes it can feel like 100% this person's into me. I see those eyes. I feel this chemistry. I can tell this person is so into me. But let me tell you how many men get that wrong. How many men?
Why you go 90 and they go 10.
Exactly. Will Smith, he has all the best advice.
That's right.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Because most of them get it wrong. And this happens all the time. This again comes back to women trying to navigate their body in this, male dominated world, because a lot of times we just want to be friendly. I don't want to make him upset, whatever. I can tell he's trying to hit on me, but Like, I'm just going to be nice because I don't want to make them upset. And so you're nice, you're friendly. He interprets that as, oh,
Yeah, and
she's
we
going to.
interpret it as it's a go, or the opposite. We get shunned, and she's playing hard to get. Let's turn on the game, right? So I get it. Yeah, we gotta talk more. We gotta communicate what's
Exactly.
going on.
And this is what I want to get over. This, I'm not going to speak for every woman and say that every woman would like to be asked, because I'm sure there's a demographic of women out there that are like, no, that's not cute, whatever. Like, I'm not going to speak for them, but
Fair.
I will say that I think it's way worth risking ruining a moment. I would argue that you're not ruining anything, and then to put your lips on someone who did not want it, and now have to deal with the repercussions of someone took advantage of my body and I didn't want
Yeah.
that.
I
Because
have
usually
asked
it's
a couple
not
of
just lips,
times.
it's like lips and hands, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot.
No, I've asked a couple of times before first kiss, and I will say, if I read it right, which I did, they thought it was cute, so
Mm-hmm.
that only plays. But I, hmm, yeah, I like that.
So what? Yeah. So what is this idea that the more we talk, the less sexy it is, or like the less cute it is?
I
Like,
don't
where
know
did
where
that
that
come
comes from. I don't know. Because when we think about it, and now that I'm older, you talking about having the conversation early, making it playful, flirtatious. That does sound like fun. That does sound
from? Mm-hmm.
like, like like an activity like you could do together. And
Mm-hmm.
if anything, I don't know why a guy wouldn't do that, because it's gonna give you a chance to read the room a little bit better versus going in blind dick first. Right? I mean, it's
Yes.
like, why wouldn't
Exactly.
you wanna go in with a stacked deck, right? Like,
Right.
uh, yeah, man, you blow my mind.
That's
I love it.
what I'm
I
here
love it. Where were
for.
you years ago? But I hope that he gets that and he understands it, because I think we're talking more specific about, hooking up and sex and all these other things, but a lot of it is applicable to just relationships in general as he gets older. And I just really appreciate you taking time. I'm really excited for you to continue on this journey of entrepreneurship and everything. Talking with you, I could tell your clients are getting a lot of value out of it. And yeah, I'm just so thankful I got you now before you really took off and you're like, doing these,
Yeah, I'm booked for the next month. You won't be able to get me.
No, I'm just so
Yeah.
thankful for you. And yeah, you're awesome.
Thank you, Andrew. This has been wonderful. I appreciate your openness and willing to talk about a difficult topic. Anyone who's watching, I would love to continue the conversation, and you can find me on Instagram at heruntold.stories, my website, heruntoldstories.com. My name is Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is awesome. So I really appreciate you, Andrew.